your data centers, right, and your servers, do they or do they not use NVIDIA chips?
They do.
They do?
Yeah.
So what's going on right now, right, U.S. restricting and tightening the noose even further, at some stage it's got to affect your business, no?
So let's just take a step back. If we understand this movement called AI, I liken it to the internet. And when earlier, or maybe in the latter half of the previous century, when DARPA, etc. were coming up, and from where internet is today, I see AI growing to be a utility. And
it'll be like water, like electricity is what you're saying.
Like electricity.
Okay, all right.
You turn on a switch and you can find, it's up to the creative genius of the people as to how and what they want to use it for.
Okay.
And while there would be sort of one step forward, two step backwards, or two step forwards, one step backward in the journey, but in the long term, I'll say in the medium term, AI is here to stay. Now, whether a particular brand of hardware would drive or continue to drive the momentum, whether a particular kind of compute effort or compute architecture is going to keep driving the momentum, or we're going to have a new compute architecture which is going to drive the momentum, is for the future to tell.
Are you brand agnostic? Is that what you're trying to say?
Brand agnostic to the extent that we want to support the countries that we're in for adopting AI. We are encouraging people to have in-country, homegrown applications, use cases which are suitable for that particular country. And we are trying to provide the infrastructure for that. So to that extent, whatever is the architecture, whatever is the hardware that is to be used, we are happy to support it, of course, within the frameworks of the regulations.
Okay, Sherry.
Mayank, is there any part of your data center build-out experience where you had the hardest time getting supplies? It could be chips, power, or cooling equipment. Is there anything that, I don't know, keeps you up at night?
A few things do, Sherry. Great question. So yes, as the rack densities for the current hardware keeps going through the roof, what that means is that, think of it like an almirah where you have your clothes inside. That almirah is going to be consuming 200 kilowatts of power. Think of 200 kilowatts of power that probably lights up maybe 3 or 4 HDBs blocks. They're going to go up to 600 kilowatts in that one almirah, and then 1 megawatt in that same almirah. So yes, the whole sort of distribution of power keeps us awake, and also the environmental impact as to how do we make sure that, you know, for my grandchildren, I'm not leaving zeroth of a planet for them. That are things that, of course, keep us awake.
I have two questions. One, just to continue building on this topic of energy efficiency. This comes up very often. Can you share some of the newer technologies, whether it's on the chip design side itself or in cooling technologies that you're implementing? And for people who are looking at investment opportunities across the region and around the world, what are some of those more promising technologies? And the second separate question is, most data center companies I've evaluated or I think about are very geographically concentrated. A company is typically an Indonesia-centric data center company, or a Malaysia-centric data center company, or Singapore-centric. BDx's expansion is accelerating, and you're going from the Middle East to Southeast Asia. How are you doing that in this environment? Are there certain things that you have to contend with that somebody who is very locally focused doesn't have to contend with?
Excellent question, and that is, and we've been lucky actually. We're in countries as disparate as Singapore, Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, Indonesia. And the only way that we have been able to solve for these countries, the way we work for these countries, is that we respect the fact that each country has its own heartbeat. And when any international business gets into that country, you have to have the due humility to realize the fact that you have to solve for that country's problems, and not sort of just go in and say that this is how I work, my way or the highway. That does not work. We focus a lot on creating and recruiting and sort of building in-country talent. We work from countries like Indonesia, which are emerging in the digital space, to Singapore, which is like right up there. So the approach for each country has to be to suit that particular country's requirement. Having local talent is the key.
What about cooling technology, Mayank? Liquid versus air. Air seems to be more of the traditional cooling technology here. Is there something that you prefer, or is there something that the industry is end up going with down the road?
The industry would end up going down the road with liquid cooling. Is it something that we prefer? Yes, we prefer that simply because it's a lot more efficient. So the energy that is required to cool the data center goes down significantly when you are doing very focused, targeted cooling to the chip, rather than cooling the entire environment of the data center. So the liquid cooling technologies that we've put in place and for which we've been certified by NVIDIA recently is to focus us to get PUEs as low as 1.1. So what that means is, for every unit of power being consumed by the servers, is just 0.1 unit of power being required for cooling. So yes, liquid cooling is the way forward, not only for AI workloads, but also for the regular cloud workloads.
Mike, I want to ask you and bring you back to something you said just a couple of minutes ago when we first started, right? And that is that AI eventually will become like a utility for everybody, like water, like electricity. You just turn it on and it's there, right? And you almost take it for granted, right? From an investor standpoint, though, right? As an investment, right? Utilities usually work best when they are regulated and there's some certainty, right? Should there be, and let's take Indonesia, for example, where you're probably most heavily invested, right? What sorts of regulations are there that govern your business?
Great question, Mark. And probably in the digital space, the two sort of streams which are crying hoarse to be regulated are AI and data centers. Simply because of the impact that these industries can have in the short to medium to long term on mankind and on the planet. Specifically about regulations around the region, I think they're still evolving. Europe is sort of the highest or sort of the most ahead on the way regulations, on the way they regulate some of these businesses.
But I got to ask you, right? Europe, when people talk about Europe and regulation, they usually say Europe is just too regulated. Is that the case with AI or data centers, or not yet?
Yeah, for sure for AI. And here's the thing, you need to get the distance between regulation and innovation to be right. If innovation is way ahead of regulations, then you'll probably end up like 2008. If regulation is way behind innovation, if regulation is way ahead of innovation, then you would probably end up stifling innovation. Regulation has to be easy. I don't know if you've got out of Terminal 3 at Changi, you don't need to present your passport, right? Regulations need to be efficient in the context of making sure that the incentives are aligned for the value chain in the ratio of the capex or the risk that they are taking. If you just go out and put out regulations there, you're courting trouble, and if you're not regulating, you're again courting trouble. Finding the right mix is the key.